Those of you who don't do email may not have heard by now. We had one of our congregants, our family members, which was Carl Odell Malone, pass away on the 25th of September, and yesterday we had his memorial here. And you could tell how well he was liked and loved, because there was barely any empty seats in this sanctuary. So it tells you how large the crowd was, where people hung around till about 2 o'clock, Jen? So, and I was like, okay, see y'all later. So I usually, especially if they're members of our congregation or their family members, they know the routine, they know what you all expect is make sure you leave the place clean and make sure it's locked up, which they did. So if you have a chance, if you have a moment, drop a card or give Lois a phone call and, just convey your condolences. So as you can imagine, when someone passes, there's different journeys that every person takes. And even when you are expecting someone to pass, it doesn't hurt any less. So just keep that in mind. Keep her in her prayers along with her sons and her grandchildren as well. And Odell's only living sibling, which was Arnie, who gave the eulogy yesterday. Keep him and his family in your prayers as well. The Gospel of Luke, known for its emphasis on compassion and social justice, presents us with a powerful story of Zacchaeus. This narrative, set against the backdrop of World Communion Sunday, invites us to reflect on the transformative power of inclusion and the importance of seeking out those who are often overlooked. Which brings me to another point on World Communion Sunday, is that Protestants celebrate World Communion Sunday one Sunday out of the year. And it's on a first Sunday, which most of us celebrate communion anyways. But there's so many other faith practices, other churches and denominations outside of the Roman Catholic Church who celebrate communion every time they worship. And so keep that in mind as well, that while we as Protestants celebrate World Communion Sunday in October, we should really think about being in communion with each other as humanity throughout the entire year. Every single Sunday we come together, we shouldn't just pray for our own needs, but for those needs of everybody else. So I want you to keep that in mind. Zacchaeus, a wealthy tax collector, was often viewed with disdain and suspicion. His profession, associated with collaboration with Roman occupiers, makes him an outcast in Jewish society. Despite his social status, though, Zacchaeus longs to see Jesus. That also happens with those who we today shun away from the doors of a sanctuary, from God's house. They long to be close to Jesus as well. But many of us will do exactly what they were doing to Zacchaeus and ridicule, demean. Story is set during Jesus' journey through Jericho, a city known for its wealth and corruption. Doesn't seem like much has changed in today's world. We still have wealth, which is okay, but we still have a lot of corruption as well. Zacchaeus, a symbol of this city's excesses, climbs a sycamore tree to get a glimpse of Jesus. Now, can you imagine one of you climbing up a tree and trying to get a hold of Jesus? Who would do that? Rita says, I guess depending how easy the tree is to climb. Think about it. He was so desperate to get a glimpse of Jesus that he climbed the tree. And it doesn't say his age. Imagine, what if he was around your age? His actions reveal his determination and his desire for connection. See, that's part of the reason why we are an inclusive church community. We want people to have the space to feel connected to Jesus, to God, to their spirituality. Yesterday, I was talking with a couple of our congregants who were here, and they know who they are because I'm not going to mention their names. But I was saying how we have this sign on the other side of this wall, which is the same greeting that we use at the beginning of our service. No matter who you are or where you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. But some will have you think that we're not living into it because we won't allow toxic rhetoric, toxic theology. And I mentioned before that that sign does have an invisible little asterisk. And it says that that's okay if that's what you believe. But when we come into these doors, when we come into this setting, when we come to this table, that has to be set aside. We have to be able to see each other eye to eye and listen to each other. Not talk over each other. Not ignore what the other person is saying so that only I am heard. If Judy came to me and we started talking, I'm like, oh yeah, but on my week off, I was doing this, and she's over here pouring out her heart. And I'm like, yeah, and then, I had to come, and I did the memorial, and it was real busy, and where am I doing any justice? We don't know how much it may have taken for Judy to come and try to talk things out, or say, I need someone to hear me out. Now, I use her because she's right there. But think about it. What if that was you? And I know that has been some of you in the past few years. It's hard. But you see, that's why Zacchaeus' story is important, is that we should allow that space. Now, I've said before that Christ Church UCC in Des Plaines is a purple congregation, and not just because it's my favorite color, but theologically and politically, we combine and we're a purple congregation. And that's okay. That's the uniqueness of being a church family. And that's what the message is, what Jesus is trying to send to these folks. Is saying, it doesn't matter if you think he's a sinner. He belongs in this space too. Jesus notices Zacchaeus' efforts and calls out, inviting him to come down from the tree and dine at his house. Think about that. What if someone were to come in today that we've never seen before? Maybe they're just having one of the darkest chapters of their lives. And they come in and they sit down. And maybe one of you, and I don't see this happening, but let's say one of you just kind of looked at that person, just kind of up and down. Like, I don't know you. Instead of doing the usual, which the majority of you do, is like, hi, good morning. And then sometimes they want to run anyways. But let's say that you stared at someone like that. I've had that done when I've walked into a church community. I'm sure some of you have too. What happens then? What message are you sending without your words? Surely we're not sending the same message that Jesus is. We're not saying you came down from the tree and we're inviting you to dine with us. You're kind of sending that message. It's like, well, we'll see if we can set another place for you. If that was you at that end, how would that make you feel? How many of you were raised that no matter how much food you had or didn't have, if someone came in during that mealtime, you would make room? Most of us, if not all of us, were raised that way, correct? It's the same concept. You know, since I've started actively discerning into our ordained ministry, and now that I'm in ordained ministry, and Jacob's heard me say it before, is I've joked around about it, but I'm really serious where I said, I don't care how you come dressed for worship service. I don't care if you just got off your night job. As long as you have some clothing, you're welcome to come and sit with us and celebrate and worship. And you're welcome to come into fellowship with us. Why? Because you're not in that person's shoes to see what drew them to that night job that they have. Because maybe that's what they feel that's the best they have. And at the same time, you don't know if they're happy doing that. Now, some of us would be like, I would never. Maybe they thought the same thing at one point in their life. What happens if someone who's without a home comes in through our doors because they know it's a church, and technically a church is supposed to be a safe zone? And maybe they haven't bathed in a few days or a few weeks. Are we going to tell them, oh, well, you got to go sit over there? Now, some of us have a high sense of smell like I do, so it might be a little hard, but we're not going to tell them to go sit somewhere else. We let them choose their seat. But before they leave, we'll ask them, is there something we can do to help you within our means? Whether it's finding them food, whether it's finding them a resource to get clothing, we have to do our part. See, in here, Jesus is doing his part in trying to get Zacchaeus to connect spiritually. It's an unexpected invitation that surprises Zacchaeus, who responds with repentance and a commitment to restitution. Think about that. What if there was another situation where someone came in and they just made some poor choices throughout their lives, and they finally reached the point where it's like, maybe I'm not doing this right. And all they need to hear is that friendly welcome to allow them to know they're going on the right track. Who's encountered that? That one congregation that I served for a brief period, I remember there was a young man that came in pretty late in the day, and at that church, the office was pretty much open from 8 a.m. to about 7 or 8 p.m. So there was 3 schedules. So I showed up whenever because it was a very long day. Now, I remember one day, the staff member who was there was like, oh, there's a guy, he wants to go pray in the sanctuary. Now, if you're familiar with the congregation that I'm speaking of, that it's no longer in existence, you're familiar with how big of a building it was. This is not big compared to that one. This is on the smaller side. But it was a walk to get to the sanctuary. And all this person wanted to do was just sit down in quiet, in stillness. And I said, can I help you with anything? Do you want me to pray with you? And he's like, no, I just want to go sit up there. I just need to spend some time in there. And that's it. I allowed him to have that space. Sometimes we need that space. See, here, Zacchaeus is not asking for that space. Zacchaeus is reaching out. It challenges, historic challenges our preconceptions and invites us to see others with compassion and understanding. Now, most of us are human, as far as I know. And we've probably at one point or another in our life have kind of looked at someone funny. And maybe we didn't mean anything by it, but we did. And then we realized, I shouldn't have done that. And a lot of times it starts because the younger versions of us see adults modeling that behavior. See, with our nieces, early on, we taught them that even if you're someone that's out of the corner begging for food or money, they're human. They want to be seen. They want to be acknowledged. Now, as an adult, sometimes you're a little busy. You're like, I don't have anything, and you keep walking. Especially if you see the same person over and over and over. And sometimes they're pretty well dressed. Because unfortunately, any part of our society, we have those who take advantage one way or another. Does not matter what part of our society. But I still remember when we lived in Hyde Park when we first moved, we went to a pizza place. We had almost combined a whole pizza. And outside, there was a man who said, I'm a veteran, I'm just having some bad luck. And, I can pay you back. If I see you again, I'll pay you back. We hadn't touched that pizza, so we gave it to him. Didn't cost us anything. We had already paid for it. We had already eaten. And we told him, you don't owe us anything. And I know Jacob's done the same thing a couple of times in the loop. And sometimes all these people want is for you to see them. It's not about giving them something. It's about being seen. How many times have you not been in that situation where you want to be seen? See, that's why Zacchaeus is being transformed as he encounters Jesus. It reminds us that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. Even those who seem most unlikely to change can deeply be touched by the love of Christ. The story also highlights the importance of inclusion in our faith community. We create a space where everyone feels valued and loved by welcoming everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. Now, in the past few years, you may have felt that, well, I told them this, but he didn't do anything about it. Well, you may not have seen action, but I did think about it. But I've said before that my job is to do for the whole, not for the few. And my job as your pastor and teacher is to make sure that our community continues to sustain itself. And we have been doing that. Look around you. Think of the COVID period. How many of you were in the pews? And look at now. I know since I started around that period, we've almost doubled that average attendance. And yes, some of it is because we pretty much got out of it, but some of you have been called to come on a weekly basis. Some of you might be routine. Some of you is because mom and dad force you. Looking at Katie over there. We all have a different reason for being here. And for me, it's because this is my calling, and unfortunately, you all make me be here by 9:30 to start the service. But I wanted to join Emily because she wanted to take a nap already. And I was like, let's go take a nap. Sounds good to me. See, the celebration of communion as we gather today, we remember Jesus' sacrifice and the unity it brings to all believers. Sacrament of communion symbolizes our shared faith and commitment to following Jesus. Does that mean if someone says, well, I don't believe in Jesus, they're like, oh, well, never mind? Or are you still going to help? Because at the end of the day, you're still a Christian. And by default, you are still called to do good by your fellow human. Just because they do not practice the same thing or believe the same thing does not mean you're going to exclude them. So let us remember the example of Zacchaeus, who was welcomed into the community of faith despite his past. And we strive to be a church that is inclusive and welcoming to all. The story of Zacchaeus serves us as a powerful testament to the transformative nature of God's love. It compels us to view others with deep compassion and understanding, and to foster a spirit of wholehearted inclusion within our faith communities. As we come together to observe World Communion Sunday, a day of global unity, we wholeheartedly reaffirm our commitment to following in Jesus' compassionate footsteps. Let us purposely seek out and uplift those often overlooked or marginalized. May our church be a shining embodiment of God's boundless love and grace in all endeavors and interactions.